I wasn't supposed to be noticed. I was the girl in the background, the one who cleaned the windows of skyscrapers I'd never enter. But then a man who owned the sky looked down. Caspian Vance didn't offer me a hand. He offered me a cage made of gold. He said, "I need a wife for 365 days. No feelings, no touch, just a signature." I thought I was saving my family. I didn't realize I was signing a contract for the destruction of my own heart. The smell of a hospital is something you never truly forget. It's a mixture of cold antiseptic, stale coffee, and the lingering scent of fear. My name is Elise, and for the last 6 months, that smell had been my only constant. I sat in the plastic chair of the waiting room, my head resting against the cool glass of the window. Outside, Seattle was a blur of gray rain and neon lights. Inside, my world was narrowing down to a single number: $250,000. That was the cost of the surgery my younger sister, Mia, needed to survive. It was a number so large it felt imaginary, like a distance to a star I could never reach. I worked 3 jobs. I cleaned offices at dawn, waited tables at noon, and pulled double shifts at a 24-hour diner at night. I was a ghost in my own life. I was 24, but I felt 100 years old. It was 2:15 a.m. when the bell above the diner door chimed. I didn't look up. I was too busy scrubbing a grease stain off the counter that refused to budge. "The coffee here is terrible, isn't it?" The voice was deep, like the low notes of a cello, and it had a sharp, commanding edge that made the hair on my arms stand up. I looked up, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. Standing by the door was a man who looked like he had stepped out of a different reality. He was wearing a coat that probably cost more than my car, and his eyes were the color of the sea just before a storm, dark, turbulent, and terrifyingly intelligent. Caspian Vance. I knew him. Everyone knew him. He was the man who had turned a small tech firm into a global empire before he was 30. He was the man the tabloids called the Iron Shadow, because he never smiled, never dated, and never showed a single crack in his armor. "We're closing," I managed to say, my voice cracking. Caspian didn't leave. He walked toward the counter, his movements slow and deliberate, like a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. He sat on one of the cracked vinyl stools and placed a thick manila envelope on the counter. "I'm not here for coffee, Elise," he said. My heart skipped a beat. "How do you know my name?" "I know everything about you," he replied, his gaze locked onto mine. "I know about your sister's medical bills. I know about the 3 bank loans you've been denied. I know that you have exactly $12.40 in your savings account." I felt a flash of anger through my exhaustion. "Is this a hobby for you? Finding people at their lowest and reminding them of it?" "No," Caspian said, leaning forward. The scent of sandalwood and rain drifted off him. "It's an interview. I need something, Elise. Something only someone as invisible and desperate as you can provide." He pushed the envelope toward me. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were photos of a sprawling estate, a massive diamond ring, and a legal document titled Marital Agreement. "My grandfather's will is very specific," Caspian explained, his voice as cold as the rain outside. "I inherit the remaining 60% of Vance International on my 30th birthday, provided I am married to a woman of good character, for at least 1 year. My birthday is in 3 weeks. My board of directors is looking for any reason to oust me. They expect a scandal. They expect me to fail." "So you want a fake wife?" I whispered. "I want a business partner," he corrected. "You will live in my home. You will attend every gala, every board dinner, and every holiday event at my side. You will be the perfect, devoted Mrs. Vance. In return, I will pay for your sister's surgery in full tonight. And at the end of 12 months, I will give you a settlement of $5 million. I looked at the contract. It was cold. It was clinical. Clause 4, no physical contact. Clause 7, no private communication with outside parties. Clause 10, no emotional entanglement. "Why me?" I asked. Caspian stood up, buttoning his coat. Because you have everything to lose if you fail and nothing to gain by loving a man like me. You're the only person I've found who understands that this is a survival tactic, not a fairy tale. He laid a fountain pen on top of the papers. The surgery is scheduled for 8 a.m. Sign the paper and the wire transfer happens at 8:01. Don't sign it and, well, I think we both know how that ends. I looked at the pen. I thought of Mia's pale face in that hospital bed. I thought of the way my bones ached every night. I thought of the man standing in front of me, a man who looked like he had never needed anyone in his entire life. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking but my mind was clear. I wasn't signing for love. I wasn't signing for a dream. I was signing for a miracle. As my name scrolled across the bottom of the page in ink that looked like blood, Caspian didn't smile. He simply took the paper, tucked it back into the envelope and nodded. "Welcome to the family, Elise," he said. "Pack your things. My driver will be at your door at 5 a.m. From this moment on you no longer exist. You are Elise Vance. And you will play your part until I tell you the show is over." He walked out of the diner, leaving me alone in the flickering neon light. I had just sold a year of my life to a stranger. I had saved my sister, but as I looked at my reflection in the dark window, I wondered if I had just lost myself. This is part 2. In this chapter we explore the golden armor. To maintain the 60-minute pace, we focus on the sensory details of Elise's transition from a girl who was invisible to a woman who is the center of the world's attention, and the suffocating silence of Caspian's world. Part 2. The luxury of silence. Estimated narration time, 12 to 15 minutes. Sound design, the heavy thud of a high-end car door. The echo of heels on marble. The distant, lonely ticking of a grandfather clock. Minimalist, cold ambient music. The sun hadn't even touched the Seattle skyline when a black sedan pulled up to my cramped apartment. I had one suitcase, mostly filled with old sweaters and Mia's favorite books. As I stepped into the car, I felt like a passenger on a ship sailing into a fog. I was leaving behind Elise the waitress. I was becoming a ghost. Caspian's estate was located on a private cliff overlooking the Sound. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress of glass, steel, and shadow. It was beautiful, but it felt like a place where laughter went to die. "Mr. Vance is in a meeting," a woman said as I entered. She was dressed in a sharp gray suit, her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. "I am Mrs. Gable, the house manager. You have 3 hours until the styling team arrives. Your quarters are in the West Wing. Mr. Vance's are in the East. You are not to enter the East Wing without an invitation." "Quarters?" I asked, the word sounding strange in my mouth. "The contract is specific, Elise," a voice rumbled from the staircase. I looked up. Caspian was descending the stairs, buttoning his cuffs. He looked even more intimidating in the daylight. He didn't look at me with warmth. He looked at me like a gardener looks at a new hedge, something that needed to be trimmed and shaped. "In this house we are business partners," Caspian said, stopping a few feet away. "In public you are the woman who captured my heart. Mrs. Gable will show you the protocol. My lawyers have already cleared the hospital bills. Your sister is in surgery as we speak." The relief that washed over me was so strong I nearly buckled. "Thank you, Caspian. Truly." "Don't thank me," he said, his voice dropping to a low, cold hum. "You paid for it with a year of your life. Now make sure I get my money's worth." The next 4 hours were a blur of humiliation and luxury. A team of stylists descended upon me like a swarm of silent locusts. They scrubbed the scent of the diner from my skin. They cut my hair into a sharp, elegant bob that framed my face like a frame on a painting. They dressed me in a gown of cream-colored silk that cost more than my father's house. When I finally stood before the mirror, I gasped. The girl in the reflection looked like a stranger. She looked powerful. She looked expensive. But when I looked into her eyes, I still saw the girl who was counting pennies in the hospital waiting room. "She'll do," Caspian said from the doorway. He walked toward me, his reflection joining mine in the glass. He stood behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders. His touch was clinical, yet it felt like a brand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was a diamond the size of a postage stamp, surrounded by sapphires the color of his eyes. He slid it onto my finger. It was heavy, felt like a shackle. "Tonight is the Founders' Gala," Caspian whispered into my ear, his breath hitching just slightly. "The board of directors will be there. They will try to bait you. They will ask about our whirlwind romance. They will look for any sign that you don't belong." "What do I tell them?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Tell them the truth, partially," Caspian said, his gaze meeting mine in the mirror. "Tell them we met in a moment of crisis. Tell them I saw something in you that no one else did. And when you look at me like I am the only man in the world who can save you." "That shouldn't be hard," I murmured. "Because you are." Caspian's grip on my shoulders tightened for a split second, a flash of something that wasn't in the contract. But then he pulled away, the mask of the iron shadow firmly back in place. "The car is waiting, Elise. It's time to show the world that Caspian Vance has finally found his queen." As we walked out of the house, the silence of the mansion followed us. I realized then that while I had saved my sister, I had entered a world where everything was beautiful but nothing was real. I was wearing $5 million on my finger, but I had never felt more like a pauper in my life. The doors of the ballroom swung open, and for a heartbeat the world went silent. Then the flashbulbs began. It was a wall of white light, blinding and aggressive. I felt my breath hitch, my lungs suddenly forgetting how to expand. The weight of the cream silk dress suddenly felt like lead. But then I felt a hand, firm, warm and steady, slide into the small of my back. "Breathe, Elise," Caspian whispered, his lips so close to my ear they brushed against my skin. "They are predators. If they smell your fear, they will tear you apart. Look at the cameras, smile like you've been keeping a beautiful secret, and don't let go of me." I did as I was told. I leaned into him, my body acting as a shield against the onslaught. We walked down the red carpet, a king and his mystery queen. To the cameras, we were the ultimate power couple. To me, we were two strangers tied together by a wire transfer. The ballroom was a cathedral of gold leaf and crystal chandeliers. Men in five-piece suits and women draped in millions of dollars of jewelry turned as we passed. The whispers followed us like a trail of smoke. "Is that her? The waitress from the diner? Vance must be losing his mind. Caspian, you finally decided to join the land of the living." The voice was sharp, like a razor blade dipped in honey. A woman approached us, wearing a dress of shimmering silver scales that made her look like a beautiful shark. This was Juliana Thorne, Caspian's lead competitor, and a woman who had spent years trying to merge their companies and their lives. She didn't look at Caspian. She looked at me. Her eyes traveled from my shoes to my bobbed hair and finally to the sapphire ring on my finger. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "And this must be the little miracle we've all been hearing about," Juliana said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Elise, isn't it? Tell me, dear, how does it feel to go from serving coffee to wearing the Vance family sapphires? It must feel like a fairy tale, or a very well-orchestrated heist." My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked at Caspian, but he remained a statue, his expression unreadable. He was testing me. He wanted to see if his investment could hold its own. I took a sip of my champagne, letting the bubbles settle my nerves. I looked Juliana straight in the eye, mirroring her cold smile. "It feels like a choice, Juliana," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Caspian and I found each other in a moment of absolute clarity. Some people spend their whole lives looking for what we found in a single night. I suppose I should feel sorry for those who still find it so hard to believe. Juliana's eyes narrowed. The air between us turned icy. Beside me, I felt the muscles in Caspian's arm relax just a fraction. "A choice," Juliana purred. "How romantic. But tell me, Elise, does a choice usually come with a non-disclosure agreement and a background check that goes back 10 years? Because my sources tell me you were quite literally a ghost until 3 weeks ago. My wife is not a public utility, Juliana, Caspian interrupted, his voice dropping into a low, lethal register. She is a Vance. And in this room, that makes her the most important person you've ever had the privilege of speaking to. Now if you'll excuse us, we have a dance to attend to. He didn't wait for her response. He led me toward the center of the dance floor. The orchestra began a slow, sweeping waltz. Caspian pulled me into his arms, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine. We moved in perfect sync. For a man who claimed to have no feelings, he was a devastatingly good dancer. As we spun, the world around us blurred into a kaleidoscope of gold and light. For a moment I forgot about Mia. I forgot about the hospital. I forgot about the contract. I looked up at him, and for the first time his eyes weren't searching for a flaw. They were just looking. You handled Juliana well, he murmured, his breath warm against my forehead. Better than I expected. I told the truth, I whispered. You did see something in me that no one else did. You saw a way to win. Caspian stopped spinning. We were in the middle of the floor, the music still playing, but for us time had paused. He looked down at me, his hand on my waist tightening, pulling me an inch closer. I saw a survivor, Elise, he said, his voice a low vibration. In a world of people who are born with everything, you were the only one who knew what it was like to fight for a single breath. That isn't just a business asset. It's rare. The moment was broken by the sound of a gavel striking a podium. The board of directors was calling for the annual toast. But as Caspian led me away, I realized that the iron shadow had a crack in it. And for the first time since I signed that contract, I wasn't sure if I was the one being saved, or if I was the one who was going to end up doing the saving. 6 months. 182 days of waking up in the West Wing, eating breakfast in silence with a man who could command an empire but couldn't say good morning, and wearing a sapphire that felt heavier with every passing hour. Mia was home. The surgery had been a success, and she was currently at a private boarding school in Vermont, her tuition paid for by a man she called Prince Caspian. To her he was a hero. To me he was a mystery I was slowly, painfully unraveling. The routine was shattered on a Tuesday morning. I walked into the dining room to find Caspian standing by the window, his tablet in hand, his face looking as though it had been carved from granite. He didn't look up when I entered. "Did you do it, Elise?" he asked. His voice was so low it was almost a growl. "Did I do what, Caspian?" He turned, sliding the tablet across the mahogany table. My heart stopped. It was a photo. Not a polished, professional photo of Mrs. Vance, but a grainy, candid shot of Elise. I was in my grease-stained diner uniform, counting a handful of crumpled dollar bills, looking exhausted and broken. The headline above it read, "The Vance Vestige. As the new queen, nothing but a waitress in disguise?" "The press has been digging," Caspian said, his eyes scanning my face for a reaction. "Someone leaked your employment records. They found the diner. They found the hospital bills. By noon, the board of directors will have an emergency meeting to discuss the integrity of my marriage. They think I hired you." "I didn't leak anything," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Caspian, I haven't spoken to anyone. I've lived like a prisoner in this house." "Then how did they get this?" He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "Juliana Thorne has been circling like a shark since the gala. If she proves this marriage is a financial transaction, the contract is void. The inheritance is gone. And you'll be back in that diner by sunset." The cruelty of his words hit me harder than the scandal. I looked at the photo, the girl who worked 3 jobs to save her sister. I wasn't ashamed of her. I was proud of her. "Maybe that's where I belong," I said, my voice rising. "At least in that diner people were honest about what they wanted. You bought me, Caspian. You treated me like a line item on a ledger. Don't act surprised when the world finds out you're a man who has to pay for a wife. Caspian flinched. It was a tiny movement, but in his world it was an earthquake. He walked toward me, his shadow falling over me, but he didn't stop until he was inches away. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face before he dropped it. I didn't buy a wife, he hissed. I bought time. But you've spent the last 6 months making me forget why I needed it. What is that supposed to mean? It means that the board is demanding a public statement, he said, his voice dropping into a dangerous, dark territory. They want an interview. They want to see us in our element. They want to see that I didn't just find a girl in a diner. They want to see that I found a woman I actually care about. And can you do that? I challenged him, my eyes stinging with tears. Can you pretend to care about someone other than yourself for an hour? Caspian didn't answer with words. He reached out, his hand finally making contact with the side of my neck, his thumb resting on my pulse. He could feel it. My heart was racing, a frantic drumming that betrayed every emotion I was trying to hide. I've spent my life playing a part, Elise, he whispered, his face descending toward mine. But when I'm with you, when we're in this house and the cameras are off, the part is the only thing that feels fake. He didn't kiss me. He did something worse. He leaned his forehead against mine, his breath hitching in the silence of the room. For a man who lived in the iron shadow, he was burning hot. The front gates of the estate buzzed. The press had arrived. The interview was starting. We have to go out there, he whispered. We have to tell them a story. We have to tell them that the photo was from the night we met. That I saw you and I knew I couldn't let you stay in that world for another second. We make it a romance, Elise. We make it the greatest love story this city has ever seen. And what happens when the year is over? I asked, my voice a broken shadow. Caspian pulled back, his eyes searching mine. For the first time the iron shadow looked terrified. We worry about the end of the year on day 365, he said. Today is day 182. And today I am not letting them take you away from me. He took my hand, his fingers interlacing with mine. As we walked toward the grand foyer to meet the cameras, I realized the scandal wasn't the photo. The scandal was that I was no longer playing a part. I was falling in love with a man who had only ever promised me a paycheck. The interview had been a masterpiece of deception. For 2 hours, Caspian and I sat on the velvet sofa in the library, the cameras capturing every stolen glance and every tender touch. He told the reporters that the photo of me in the diner was his most prized possession because it reminded him of the night his life finally began. By the time the last crew left and the gates locked behind them, the world was convinced. The board was silent. The inheritance was safe. But inside the mansion the air was thick enough to choke on. I stood by the fireplace watching the embers glow. I was still wearing the interview dress, a soft rose-colored silk that felt like a second skin. Caspian was at the bar, his back to me, the ice clinking against his glass with a frantic rhythmic sound. We did it, I said, the silence becoming unbearable. The scandal is dead. You won, Caspian. Did I? He turned around, his tuxedo jacket gone, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar. He looked disheveled and dangerous. Because it feels like I've just spent 2 hours lying to the world about a woman I don't even know. You know the contract, I snapped, the frustration of 6 months finally boiling over. You know the girl who needed money. You know the girl who plays her part. What else is there? Caspian set his glass down with a violent thud and crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped right in front of me, the heat radiating off him in waves. I want to know why you look at me like you hate me when the cameras are off, but look at me like I'm your entire world when they're on, he hissed. I want to know if you're the greatest actress in Seattle, or if I'm losing my mind. It's the contract, Caspian. Clause 10. No emotional entanglement. I shouted, my voice echoing off the high ceilings. I am following your rules. I am being the Iron Shadow's perfect investment. To hell with the rules. Caspian reached out, his hands grabbing my waist and pulling me flush against him. The air left my lungs. For 6 months, we had followed the no-touch rule like it was holy scripture. Now the wall had crumbled. "You want to know the real reason I needed this marriage?" he whispered, his face inches from mine, his eyes dark with a pain I hadn't seen before. "It wasn't just the money. My grandfather. He didn't think I was capable of caring for anything. He thought I was a machine. He told me that if I couldn't find someone to love me by 30, I didn't deserve to lead a company made of people. So you hired me to prove him wrong?" "I hired you because I thought I could cheat the system," he murmured, his thumb brushing against the silk of my dress. "I thought I could buy the look of love without the risk of it. But tonight when that reporter asked how I knew you were the one, I didn't have to look at the script. I just looked at you." The thunder rolled outside, shaking the glass of the mansion. I reached up, my fingers trembling as I touched the back of his neck, feeling the soft hair at the nape. "Caspian," I breathed. "If we do this, if we break the rule, there's no going back. On day 365 I still have to leave. The contract." "Burn the contract," he growled. He leaned down and this time there was no camera. There was no board of directors. There was only the raw, desperate hunger of two people who had been starving in a palace. The kiss was a collision. 6 months of repressed tension, 6 months of silence, and 6 months of a lie that had finally become the only truth we had left. He lifted me onto the edge of the mahogany desk, his hands tangling in my hair. For the first time the iron shadow wasn't cold. He was a wildfire. But as the fire in the hearth died down to embers, a cold thought chilled my blood. Caspian had built his life on winning. And I was starting to realize that in this game, the only way for him to win his empire was for me to eventually disappear. Day 365. The morning air in the mansion was silent, but it wasn't the cold silence of a year ago. It was a heavy, expectant silence. I stood in the center of the West Wing, my single suitcase packed and sitting by the door. On the bed lay the cream silk dress from the first night and beside it the sapphire ring. According to the contract, at 9 a.m., the $5 million would be transferred to my account. At 9:05 a.m. I was to be off the property. I walked down the grand staircase one last time. Caspian was standing in the foyer, but he wasn't alone. Juliana Thorne was there along with the chairman of the board. They weren't smiling. "You're just in time for the finale, Elise," Juliana said, holding a legal document. "I told you a waitress couldn't keep a secret this big." "Caspian, tell her. Tell her about the real reason you chose her." I looked at Caspian. He was back in his armor. His face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were full of a desperate, silent plea. "What is she talking about, Caspian?" I asked. "The selection clause," Juliana sneered, throwing a paper onto the marble table. "Caspian didn't just find you by accident, Elise. He had a scouting team. He looked for a girl with exactly the right amount of debt and a sick relative. He didn't see a survivor that night in the diner. He saw a girl who was too desperate to ever say no. He chose you because he thought you were the easiest to control." The world felt like it was tilting. I looked at Caspian. "Is it true? Was the diner? Was it a setup?" Caspian took a step toward me, his voice a low, broken rasp. "Elise, at the beginning, yes. It was a strategy. I needed someone who wouldn't ask questions. But that was before I knew you. That was before. Before you fell in love with your investment?" Juliana laughed. "It doesn't matter. The board has ruled. Using a selection clause to manipulate a marriage for inheritance is a violation of the ethics code. Caspian, you have 2 choices. You can sign this confession, state the marriage was a business arrangement, and we will allow you to stay as a minority partner. Or you can keep the girl, lose the company, and walk out of here with nothing but the clothes on your back." The silence that followed was deafening. Juliana held out a pen. This was Caspian's life. His legacy. Everything he had bled for since he was 20 years old. I looked at him, my heart breaking. "Sign it, Caspian," I whispered. "You won. You got what you wanted. Don't lose everything for me." Caspian looked at the pen. Then he looked at the board. Finally he looked at me. He walked over to the table, but he didn't pick up the pen. He picked up the contract, our original contract, and he ripped it into 100 pieces, letting the white paper fall like snow on the marble floor. "I spent 30 years building an empire so I would never have to be afraid again," Caspian said, his voice echoing with a power that made Juliana flinch. "But I realized that an empire without someone to share it with is just a very expensive grave." He turned to the chairman. "Keep the company. Keep the money. Keep the house. I don't need a selection clause to know what I want. I choose Elise." Juliana's face went pale. "You're a fool, Caspian. You'll be a nobody by noon." "I'd rather be a nobody with her," Caspian said, "than a king with you." We walked out of the mansion together. No driver. No sedan. Just Caspian and me and my single suitcase. We stood at the edge of the gates, looking out at the city of Seattle. "I have no money, Elise," he said, a small, genuine smile finally breaking across his face. "The wire transfer. I canceled it. I don't want to buy your time anymore." "Good," I said, reaching up and taking his hand. "Because I'm not for sale. I still have the small tech firm I started in college," he murmured, pulling me close. "It's not much. It's a 2-bedroom apartment and a lot of late nights. It's a struggle." "I'm good at struggling, Caspian," I whispered. "I've been doing it my whole life. But this time I'm not doing it alone." He leaned down and kissed me, not a founder's gala kiss, not an interview kiss, but a real, messy, terrifyingly honest kiss. We started with a fake marriage. We started with a billionaire's greed and a waitress's desperation. We followed every rule only to find that the only thing that mattered was the rule we broke. Real feelings were never the plan. But as we walked away from the palace and into the unknown, I realized we hadn't lost an empire. We had finally found ourselves. Final call to action. Narrator voice. Emotional and grounded. And that is the story of how the Iron Shadow gave up his crown for a heart of gold. Caspian and Elise proved that money can buy a wedding, but it can never buy a marriage. If you stayed with us for this full 60-minute journey, thank you for being part of Gemini Stories. We believe that every wrong turn can lead to the right person. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our weekly cinematic romances. Comment, "Worth it," if you think Caspian made the right choice by giving up his billions for Elise. Check out the video on your screen right now for our next story, The CEO's Accidental Bride. Until next time, remember, the best things in life aren't things. They're people. Good night and stay romantic.